Welcome to the Read Your Keys podcast. I am your host, Joel Lopez. If you are enjoying the content, go ahead and subscribe and like on YouTube and Spotify. I think that one's a follow. YouTube, Spotify, Apple, iTunes. I think that kind of runs the gamut of where we're at for Read Your Keys. Today, my guest is Mr. Andrew Strohm, the Sales King. You can find him on Twitter at Andrew Strohm. That's AndrewStrohm. It's the same thing for his IG. He is responsible for over $70 million plus of them things. Gym owner, teaches sales and success. Andrew, welcome to the show today, brother.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So I had Andrew on. He's a sales guy. It's like, well, what's a sales guy doing on the Read Your Keys podcast? Well, I like to talk about faith and business is a big part of it. And, one of the, I guess, criticism, I've been lucky to be in a church where they were receptive to business people, but I know that in a lot of other churches, they're like, no, we don't, like, you can be in business, but that's kind of a dirty thing. We want you to be involved in ministry. But I think God is everywhere. He's in with you when you're in your business, when you're a teacher, all those things. And so that's one of the things one of the reasons why I invited you on, Andrew, is I think that people of faith need, if they have a calling to be in business, to be great at it. So welcome, Andrew.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, thanks for having me. I agree with you. And, when we initially talked about, the idea for doing this, that was something that certainly came to my mind as well. And I look forward to discussing that in some depth and detail for sure.
Can you go ahead and just start off with just some background? What's your story and how you got into sales and how you
Yeah,
became so good at it?
for sure. I was not always a great salesperson, that's for sure. But I like to kind of think that I had it in my blood. My grandfather was a spectacular salesperson. He was living that sales life, back in the '80s in Manhattan.
Mm,
High dollar, high ticket stuff. He was selling blinds. I mean, it's not a sexy thing to sell, but
hmm
he was selling it by the millions, so that turned it into a pretty sexy thing to do.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, he was a salesperson and a salesman that loved his craft and loved what he was doing. And so I saw that and thought, that's pretty cool. As I went into college, I didn't know what I wanted to be, so I went into business. Isn't that how it works? It's like you just kind of pick
hmm
something. Um, and I got out of college and still didn't know what I wanted to be. So I was like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do. First year, I actually started working for the school. So I went to Southeastern University in Florida, and I was in admissions, which is basically sales for a school.
hmm
And I was like, all right, well, I like the sales aspect. Like, this is a challenge. This is fun. But, I'm working for a school, so I'm not making any money. Like, I can hardly even pay my bills. So let's
hmm
find something else to do. So I went into life insurance. I thought that was going to be like my ticket to money, except my like trainer mentor ended up being diagnosed with MS and basically disappeared, leaving me to try to figure out the whole entire business by myself. And I didn't know how to set up appointments or sell the product. I didn't know anything about the product. So I was like, this is a disaster. I basically worked there for 3 months on 100% commission, but made no sales. So, so I was like, yeah, I can't do this. Like, this doesn't make sense. So then I actually went to car insurance. I was like, the insurance thing isn't bad, but let's try a different aspect of insurance. And so I got into car insurance and did like customer service and sales, and then I really latched onto the sales side because it's always been kind of what I've enjoyed and wanted to do. And that's when I started first getting my first tastes of success in sales. And I remember that first commission check like it was yesterday. I got home and I told the wife, I was like, that's it. We're buying a cruise. Like, we're going on a cruise right now. Like, this is amazing. I finally had money to do something I wanted
Uh-huh.
to do. I was like, this is the best. Um, and from there, I really expanded my own abilities and got into teaching sales, coaching sales. I helped them with their training, designing their training, implementing their training on sales. Um, and then from there, I led sales teams, and that's when I really got a passion for teaching and coaching sales, and found out that you can be good at sales, but teaching somebody else to sell is not the same thing.
Hmm.
So that's kind of how I got into all of that. And then from there, it just expanded. I started a gym, and we're the most expensive gym in town, right? So I have to train my partners, my staff, on how do you close what's essentially high ticket gym sales, right? I do sales coaching now, and help entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, creators sell their high ticket stuff. And the all of that has tied into how I got started, which was, fighting through the failure, learning, how to do it right, and then ultimately how to teach that to other people. So,
So in insurance, that was the I guess the alignment that you had that was like, okay, this is like the fit. What was the difference between
yeah,
insurance sales and, say, I don't know, like it could have been car sales or mortgages? Because I think we might be the same age. Like mortgages were huge back
yeah,
in the like early mid, basically the 2000s. Why
yeah,
why not that area?
yeah. I mean, 100% transparently, it was the fastest thing I could find a job in.
Oh,
So, there was that like 100% commission stuff that was available. You can always find a job as a 100%
yeah,
commission salesperson.
you're right.
And for me, this was the first thing that I could find that had an underlying base salary plus commission.
Okay,
And
yeah,
I felt like that was valuable because I had just experienced 3 months without any money whatsoever,
yeah,
because I was unsure of where to go and what to do. And so that was valuable to me. That safety was valuable to me at the time. Although that type of thing ultimately has its limits, right? And
yeah,
it's not going to have the high ceiling other types of things would. So
yeah. Um, because you married already at the time?
I was dating when I started that. Got married like my first year there.
Okay.
So yeah,
So you had already kind of proven yourself. It wasn't like, "Hey, I'm married already, and now I'm not sure where the money's coming from." So there's a
right.
different type of pressure, right?
Some moments while we were like dating, engaged, where I was like transitioning between those jobs, where I was like, I better prove to her parents that I can make money. She's
Uh-huh.
cool. Like she's cool with me. She knows that I'm gonna figure this out. But her parents don't trust me at all, man. Like
Yeah. Yeah, that's another hurdle that you have to kinda work through. Um, I know I had tried some sales jobs in the mortgage and during that time, and I
hmm
was terrible at it, man. I did I always think I think I think part of it for me was just that I was never like I was never sold on what I was selling, and I think is that how much does that affect, people that you train when they're trying to sell something? It's like, "Hey, man,
that's
do you believe in what you're selling here? Because if you don't, then how are you gonna convince anybody else that what you're doing is the right thing?"
that's the first thing we have to talk about. That's the first thing we have to talk about. If you can't sell with the conviction that what you're selling is a benefit to the person you're selling it to, you know, you aren't ever going to be able to do that effectively. And there are people that are kind of like slimy salespeople, right? Like they'll
Mhm.
sell anything to anybody, but
Yeah.
even they have to convince themselves that they're doing the right thing in order to be effective, even if
Mhm.
it's only the right thing in their own mind, right?
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean that mental framework is crucial for success as a salesperson. It's the first thing that we have to go over.
It kinda makes me think of, I think there was, like, an episode of Seinfeld where, George Costanza had to take a lie detector test, and it's like, "What's the key to passing?" It's like, "You have to believe it, baby." It's like he believes his own lies.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Do you feel like you like you're just in a sales position, and obviously it's advantageous to have somebody who can sell. But do you ever have that guy that's like, hey, he'll sell anything to the detriment of the customer? And do you feel like, hey, I got to pull this guy back, or you know, like, hey,
So
maybe he's not a right fit culturally for what we're doing here?
yeah, I mean, when I led larger sales teams, I would definitely get those people who, you honestly question their moral integrity because of their actions, right?
Mhm.
And from my perspective, it's much easier to handle conversations with facts than it is to handle conversations with opinions,
Mhm.
particularly when it's something like ethical behavior or integrity. And I have had to essentially, walk people through another discussion of this is my expectation of integrity and how you would handle this, and then let people go when they wouldn't align with that and make sure their behavior was aligning with that. But for me, like when I'm hiring people that aren't, showing integrity, that's actually an easier thing for me to handle because I know the process and can let them go ultimately. But when I'm coaching people, you know, who come to me for help and then I'm worried about their integrity, that's a different challenge altogether
Yeah.
because now, I really do have to convince them to approach things from a different perspective. And all that still starts with that mental framework, right? And I think that a lot of times that comes from that scarcity mindset, right? Like they're trying to get as much as they can out of every opportunity because they have that fear that there's not enough opportunities to get them where they want to go without having
Mhm.
to quote unquote cheat the system.
Uh-huh.
So, helping people step into that abundance mindset that, ultimately, there's wealth everywhere and it can be created and found, and if you're doing the right thing, that leads to a consistency in wealth generation that essentially cheating isn't going to lead to. You will shortchange yourself. Yeah.
Well, the thing too is, you might get them now, but you're burning your bridges too, and that's it's gonna get out that if you're
Right.
not treating somebody well, you're not doing the best things for them. Whereas maybe you don't get the sale now, but if your prospect customer, whatever, knows that you're not, then word gets around that you'll do the right thing, maybe even to your not your financial detriment, but maybe you lost the deal because it's okay. It's better that you're a better fit for person down the street, or they'll give you a better deal, or whatever. There's enough.
Yeah.
We're not a right fit for each other. That stuff gets around too, right? And
Oh
you get a
yeah, for
long term,
sure.
maybe a long term customer, right? Like,
Yeah.
this person appreciates it, so you know, I got X here, but if I did the right thing,
Yeah.
well, the next person I'm gonna get X, Y, Z. How was
Yeah.
how was we talked about being people of faith. Was your faith influence, like, was that something that was encouraged or frowned upon? Because that's something that we had talked about is, I was lucky to be in churches where it was encouraged, but I do know that there's a lot of places where it's something that's discouraged.
Yeah. I mean, this is actually, you know, something that I definitely faced as I was going into business and sales. Um, I was basically taught that wealthy people are selfish people, right?
Hmm.
And it was kind of like understood that if somebody's made a lot of money, they only still have that money because they're not good enough to give it away to the poor or something like that. And it actually stopped me from being successful for a long time. And I had to kind of pause and reevaluate and say, is that kind of churchism that wealthy people are selfish people? Is that real? Is that based in the word? Is that based in truth? Or is that something that comes from something else? Right.
Hmm.
And what actually really broke me free of that was a study of the Old Testament. And the reason why is because God is the same God, whether that's Old Testament or New Testament. He didn't change,
Mhm.
right? He's unchanging, and he didn't decide to love us differently, right? And if you come from that foundation and you look at the Old Testament and how he treated his children, right, then you see that he blessed them with an open hand, right?
Mhm.
He gave them financial blessing, familial blessing. He didn't hold back his blessing from them, and it hit me like God wants us blessed as part of His love. And yeah, there's obvious like scenarios where He calls you to do something different, right?
Mhm.
And that's a specific calling. But there are also scenarios where He just totally dumps a blessing on someone, and and they may literally be the wealthiest person on earth, right? So
Right.
I was thinking through that, and I said, okay, if that's the truth, if that's how God, views wealth as a blessing and something for Him to give and take, then it's not for me to say that it's right or wrong to have that, and it's not for anybody else to tell me it's right or wrong to have that.
Yeah.
And then I stepped further into it and said, He also calls us to be good stewards of what we're given, right? And how are you being a good steward if you're not growing wealth for the kingdom, for your
Mhm.
family, for your ability to give with an open hand? And it just totally all connected for me that, the reality is that He does want us financially blessed as part of our blessing, as part of that relationship. And, when you look at the church as a body, you can't have a healthy and functioning church without people who are ready and able to give financially.
Uh-huh.
Um, and those people have to have gotten the money from somewhere, right?
Right.
And then, my mind just kept playing out like there has to be, places, businesses, examples, lights of how to run businesses from a Christian perspective and do it successfully and show that, um, you don't you don't have to limit yourself in what you're able to do or be
Mhm.
just because of that faith, so to speak.
Uh-huh.
Um, and it was really eye opening for me. And actually, when I started out in my journey in sales coaching outside of the corporate world, one of my first mentors is actually a pastor who full times his income through his side business versus his pastoring, and he mentored me in business, and that was really helpful as well to kind of open my eyes to what's possible. But there was certainly a hurdle to overcome for me, um, in my upbringing and in the perspective that I had been taught and shown in the church previously.
Yeah, that's not something that can be taken lightly, right? It's like you grow up in a family, and that has a lot to do with your thoughts around money, because that's what you learn, and the church also plays a big part of it. And the churches that
Yeah,
I grew up in, they never talked about money. So I thought that you know having a big house and stuff was bad. But
right.
you mentioned that, like, you saw it in the Old Testament. It's like, well, yeah, Abraham was blessed. They talk about all that he had. And Job was blessed. He loses it all, and then he gets seven times more. And then you have King Solomon, who asks for wisdom, and then he's the richest man in the whole world, that people come and see him, and he blesses them more than anything. And then it's like, okay, well, you mentioned that God is the same today, yesterday, today, and forever. So then we see Jesus, who one of his one of his miracles, people don't look at it this way, was a business miracle. It's when they're out fishing and they don't catch anything, and he's like, go back out. And that was a business miracle. That was a money
Oh
making
yeah,
miracle. They were selling the fish. And so, you know I think maybe it's our Western mind. We don't translate it, or we don't recognize it. But there is a lot of power in. I've read. the same thing, maybe not quite like you, but like, successful business people be like, hey, the Bible is the greatest business book there's ever been. It's like, but people will say like, oh, that's the Bible. Like, man, I don't want that religious stuff. Get out of here. I was like, all right, man. Like, it's super helpful if you'll let it.
Yeah.
Like just take away the other stuff. See if this works. Try this out. And I mean, that's what's one of the things that's great about our faith is, God, Jesus say, taste and see that I am good. So taste it, man.
Yeah.
Just like those Costco samples, man. Like, they're giving them out. Try it out, and then then buy for yourself. But taste it first.
Yeah. And you know who's spectacular or was spectacular at connecting the biblical truths of business to the modern day story of business? Jim Rohn was
Hmm.
spectacular at that. And if you watch his, if you watch his seminars and you hear how he talks about business and the Bible, he does a spectacular job of connecting and marrying, those biblical stories and applying them to, how would you apply that to business? And that was another thing that helped me read the Bible in a different way. Was listening to a Jim Rohn seminar.
Hmm. Was that kind of one of your like introductory, like, because a lot of businesses is right in your head, right? Like this is me
Oh
against
yeah,
me and my limiting beliefs and the things that I think that I'm capable of, or the things that I think are moral. Because if I don't think it's moral to make money, well, guess what? You're not gonna, maybe you make it, but you're gonna find a way to get rid of it, because your
exactly right.
programming is just like, I
Yeah,
can't keep it. I got to get rid of it some way, and so it'll find a way to leave
yeah.
you.
Jim Rohn was the turning point for me, and it actually took place when I got the very first sales job, and I didn't know it had taken place yet until 10 years later. So I watched this whole seminar. I took notes. I was mind blown by his connection of the word and a business. And I took, I mean, copious notes, right? Tons of notes. And then I forgot all about it for a decade. And I was cleaning my desk out as I was shifting positions at my job and found this notebook. And I started flipping through. I was like, what in the world is in here? And then, like, it literally just blew me away. And it was like I wasn't ready for the message at that time, the first time I
Mhm.
heard it. And after a decade of experience, I reread those notes and I was so floored that, I mean, that literally was a triggering point for me to go from just flowing through life and kind of taking what's been given to me and changing who I am and who I'm capable of being in terms of, like, my future by changing, my value personally,
Mhm.
and then learning to translate that value to monetary value later. I mean, that Jim Rohn seminar that ultimately ended up being, notes in a notebook, was the triggering event for me to really, you know, blow up kind of my preset ideas of what I was going to be.
Uh,
And I started right after that. I started the gym. I started, researching other businesses and doing additional, business outreach, things like that. So, yeah, I mean, that certainly was a triggering point for me.
so those 10 years, was it kind of s- I don't know if a static 10 years, but like, oh, okay, I'm doing
It
fine.
was, no, man, static is the perfect way to put that. I had gotten some early success. I had translated that into a couple of moves in terms of the corporate ladder.
Uh-huh.
Had done a lot of work from a learning and training sales and teaching sales and all of that, but I hadn't done any work on myself. And as a result, like, I wasn't any more valuable other than that one small aspect a decade later than I had been, when I started. So, a static 10 years, I mean, that's kind of an understatement. Like, I felt like because I wasn't going anywhere, so to speak, I was moving backwards. And it was part of,
Uh-huh.
like, this boiling frustration that ultimately culminated in me, kind of exploding outward with growth, you know?
Uh-huh. Was any of that partly due to like, hey, you know, getting married and having kids at that time, or is that part of it?
It was, but it also wasn't. You know,
Yeah.
there was certainly external distraction, and my own faith went through you know phases during that time as well. I mean, I really halfway through that kind of started to drift away, and there was some things that took place that really like snapped my attention back and said, hey, like you need to take your faith as seriously as you take anything else.
Uh,
And you know, there was a several year journey where I had to kind of allow myself to be corrected and come back to what I knew was truth. And
mhm,
God used that to help me you know develop as a leader within the church at the back end of that time frame. So he was working in me to develop me as a person for the things that were to come. Even though I felt like I was in this place of frustration, like just stuck in this
uh-huh.
circle, like the wilderness, right?
Yeah.
Just walking in circles, not doing anything. But he was shaping me in other ways that I didn't see at the time, that allowed me to be what I am now.
Isn't that interesting, that
Yeah.
you can look back on it now and be like, "Oh, I was being tested, I was being, prepared for," but during that season, it's just so frustrating. It's like, you
Hmm.
know, why am I still in the same place? I have, knowledge
Yeah.
or whatever, and I'm still in the same place. Why am I not satisfied or content with, what I have? Um,
Yeah.
but you see those, maybe there were some setbacks that you had there, but those setbacks are what sets you up for the comeback. That way, when you do take those, um, we'll say, places of authority, you've passed the integrity tests to get
Yeah.
there. Because
Yeah.
I think of the story of Joseph. Like, he goes from being uh a slave to being a servant to being in the prison. He had to prove himself during all those times before he could be Pharaoh's right hand man.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty some dark days, but ultimately
Yeah.
it was the betrayal that he went through was to save his family and his
Yeah.
people. But you know that's pretty crappy. That's a pretty crappy ride to get there.
Yeah, for sure. Right. And but then you talk about another spectacular example of God, blessing somebody, financially. You can't be more financially blessed than the second in command in the wealthiest nation in the world at the time, right?
Right,
Like that's
right.
as high as it gets generally. So
And having your choice of like, hey, your family's coming, pick whatever land you want. It's like, whatever
yeah,
land you want. Go ahead.
exactly.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Whatever you want. Like, imagine
yeah,
going to, Florida or California. What do you want? Just coast, take it. It's fine. It's no
yeah.
big deal.
That's good.
So what was so you go from a 10-year, because was it like a full 10 years? Like, hey, like you start 10 years in the insurance industry, maybe you get a few promotions, and then like you get the itch of like, hey, I'm not utilizing my talents to the extent, or I'm bored,
Yeah,
both.
I I had this stirring, like I'm capable of more. I'm capable of more. I'm capable of more. What am I doing? You know, I don't feel like I'm utilizing my abilities. I don't feel like I'm leveraging the skills that I've built. I don't feel like I'm providing for my family to the extent I know is possible. There's just all these different things that were really just bothering me and led me to believe like there's more for me than this. And that was definitely like a stirring that had been happening and just driving me nuts. And actually, one of my business partners at the gym, literally, the conversation we had when we decided to go into business together was him saying, "Listen, I've heard you whine enough about not doing enough in life." And he's like, "This is your shot. Let's do this together, and let's start something, and let's build a business." And it was
Uh-huh.
hilarious because he could call me on my crap, and I was like, "Ooh,
Yeah,
yeah,
you're
first
right.
of all, you're right. Like I was
Yeah,
whining. I had to stop that. But second, the only way for me to right that ship was action. And I had to stop talking about it and I had to start taking action. And that is an influential theme in my life from that point forward, was stop talking about it and start taking action.
Mm. So was this something that you had talked with your partner about before of just like, hey, start a business, or it was more of like, hey, I'm just bored at work.
It was, I
That was
mean,
it.
initially it was I was bored at work, right? And then it had shifted into I really want to build a business, but I don't know what. I really want to
Uh,
build a business, but I don't know what. There's got to be something that I can do that would allow me to be successful. I just don't know what it is. And we just would go in these circles, and he's like, "Man, I don't know." He's like, "Yeah, you've got something. You can do it. I just don't know what you could do either." And then it was actually a separate conversation between him and our third business partner that they were like, dude, I would love to build a gym. And both of them were like, yeah, I don't know how to do that. And he came to me and said, all right, man, like we have this dream of owning a gym, but we don't know how to make that a reality. And we know that you know these things. Are
uh,
you willing to partner with us and to make that a reality and build this out? And that was like the moment, that I had to decide, was I really going to take action, or was I
mhm,
going to continue whining about stuff? And for me, the gym was like a perfect first business, because I saw the value of fitness. I saw these two partners as strong partners to work with, and I
uh-huh.
was like, yeah, no brainer for me. Let's do this.
What was skin in the game for you? The hurdle, right? Because it's I always think about like when people tell their stories, it's like like, oh, it's not a big deal. You have a job to go start a gym, but there's a mental hurdle or a Goliath that you have to
Oh yeah,
fight to be able to get there. And I think that people dismiss it because it's like, oh, they're so used to seeing superhero movies and fighting, whatever. But
yeah,
what was the skin of game sacrifice that was kind of the hairy monster for you?
man. Um, Sorry, give me 1 second. Um, we decided to start a brick and mortar gym, a physical gym, and we weren't going with a franchise. We were just starting something fresh, from scratch. And so we needed capital. We had to have cash to do this. None of us had started a business before, so we weren't sure what in the heck we needed to do or how much money we needed. So we basically just had to come up with a best guess of how much money is this going to really take to launch this thing and to be successful. And it was all on me because the two of them had no idea. And it was all on me to figure that out. So the first hurdle was, am I willing to take the pressure of risking this investment, whatever it may end up being, and its outcome is on me?
Uh-huh,
They've got their specialties, but that business aspect is my call.
uh-huh,
And that freaked me out at first, right? And I was like, all right, again, I have to stop talking about it. I have to start taking action. How am I going to do this? I'm just going to do it, right? So I was like, all right, guys, yes, I'm willing to do this. But then when I came up with the number, it was more money than we had at our disposal. It was like, all right, well, guys, we need this much money. And right now we've got about this much money. And the only answer was I could access my life savings and just dump everything that I had into this
uh-huh,
business and say, I'm just going to send it. Like this sinks or swims, this makes it or doesn't. But my entire life savings is tied up in this thing.
uh-huh,
And at that point, I was just like, you know what? I have to take massive risk if I'm going to break out of whatever the heck I'm in now, which was just
mhm,
this stale circle, right? And I was like, I don't care. I don't care if this thing flops. I don't care if this thing, is a disaster. I mean, I do, obviously, like that would be a
right,
nightmare.
right,
But also like that outcome isn't the worst outcome. In my mind, the worst outcome was doing nothing, taking no action, and still being the same person in 5 years that I was today. And
mhm,
I was like, I can't be that person anymore. And so I was like, that's it. Like I told the guys, I was like, I'm willing to just push it all in. Like, let's put all the chips on the table and go. And like they kind of looked at each other and looked back at me, and I'll never forget his words. He just kind of smirks a little bit, and he's like, "Let's send it." And I was just like,
Uh.
"Yeah, for sure." So it was awesome because we launched out into the deep, right? We launched out into the darkness. We had
Mhm,
no idea what was going on, and the reality was there were moments where I was like weeping, right? Like, just, I've made the worst decision. I'm going
uh-huh,
to lose everything. I'm a failure. I've let down my family. I've let down my partners. There were those moments, and there were those moments of darkness that I had to kind of push through and pray through 100% honestly.
uh-huh,
And there was a couple things in there, that God moved and showed me that, dude, settle down, man. Like,
uh-huh.
you're worrying, but I've got this.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, yeah, like, that's not a problem. Give me
That's
one
always
second.
a no, go ahead,
I
I'll
gotta
go and
plug this
talk through
in.
it.
Yep.
Um, that's always something that's, we think about, like, I think about my kids. Like, my kids don't worry about, like, if I'm paying the mortgage or if I'm paying the insurance. It's like, daddy's got this. Like,
Right.
settle down." But I also love that you tell the real story, right? Like, it's just one thing to be like, "Hey, Andrew Strohm, gym owner, whoop-de-doo." But it's like, no, Andrew Strohm, who was working his normal 9 to 5, took his life savings to start a gym. And I don't know if people don't understand this because, it takes when you have, like, a family to take care of. It's like, I am taking my kids' opportunities here. This
Yeah.
is their preschool, this is their activities, their private school, their whatever. Like, I'm taking all of that, and I'm risking it here for this idea that I have. That is nothing, like, that's nothing to diminish. That's a big thing, and that's why I like telling these stories, because I
Yeah.
want other husbands, fathers to hear, "Hey, Andrew, put his balls on the line, took all the money that he had." Because I'm sure there's lots of it. I mean, I have ideas of things that I want to do. And there's other, millions of other men just like me and you, who have this idea, who are working a 9 to 5, and it's like, this is nice because, coming from where I'm from, like, I live in a nicer house than I ever lived in when I was a kid. My kids do
Yeah.
things that I never did as a kid, so, like, that's
Yeah.
very satisfying, because, like, man, look at my kids, like, something simple, like, my kids took swim class. I never took a swim class. I'm not a very good swimmer, but, like, I see my kids like fish. I was like, man, I'm so impressed by my kids. Like, look at how, like,
Yeah.
they're they're getting the opportunities, and that means a lot. But to
Yeah.
say, like, okay, I'm gonna take all we own, and, we could end up in the streets. Whatever,
Yeah.
because you don't know. And how long ago was it when the gyms? Was it like, is it fairly recent, or has it been a few years now?
Yeah. So, two things. I want to touch on something you said because I'm going to forget. I'm that guy that forgets everything.
Go ahead.
Um, One is, a lot of the times when you talk about successful people inside the church, a lot of people talk about what they're capable of doing and buying and being because of the money that they have, right? And there's this attitude of must be nice, and that's a dismissive attitude.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, must be nice. They can go on 3 vacations a year instead of one. Must be nice. They can drive a nice car. And like that is, it's an insidious statement. It's a poisonous statement that basically says you didn't do anything valuable to earn that additional wealth. You didn't do anything to earn that wealth. It just got dropped in your lap. And
Uh-huh.
I'm jealous of the fact that you have it and I don't. And
Mhm.
it's a statement that just says so much. And it's like, I hear it, like my hair stands up because I know from experience the depths that I had to go to come out on the other side and say, I'm finally showing some signs of success years later, through all of that effort, all of those trials, right? And it's one of those things where I help correct that whenever I see it as lovingly as possible and
Mhm.
say, they've done and sacrificed so much to make that a reality. You know, I'm glad they've been blessed and able to do that the reality is they could have lost everything, right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh,
Right.
wow.
Right.
And, that really is true. Um, yeah, but my own personal journey has been a wild roller coaster. It was 4 years ago I decided to start the gym with these guys, and it took us 8 months to even get the ball rolling. We had to find a place. We had to learn everything we could about business, like in terms of actually starting one. I've been to business school. I have an MBA. None of that actually helped in really starting a business. And I was like, this is wild. They didn't teach me any of these things. And we finally stepped out and launched the business about 3 years ago. And we went from just opening our doors to cash flow positive in 8 months, which was amazing. Like for a brick and mortar store to turn, cash flow positive that quickly was awesome. And we were like, hey, we can do this. Like, we've got momentum. We've got some success. We're on easy street now. Like, we've still got money in the bank. Everything's going to be fine. And then we had a coach who worked for us turn around, take 25% of our business to another gym. And it was brutal. It was a lesson for sure. So all of a sudden we took a 25% hit in revenue, and we're like, yo, that hurt, but
Yeah.
we still know what we're doing. We can figure this out. 2 weeks after that, COVID starts impacting the business, and they shut us down. And, that was terrifying because we didn't have enough in the bank to last what we assumed would be a lengthy shutdown. And we would have shuttered the doors. We would have closed. There was no way through it. But fortunately, my business is in Florida, and they allowed us to reopen within weeks. And as a result, our business, it was able to kind of hobble along long enough until we were able to get a small business loan through the SBA to survive the shutdown. So that loan allowed us to survive the shutdown. Now we're all of a sudden, another $50,000 in debt on top of our startup debt, right? Yeah. And it's like, oh my gosh, what are we doing? Like, this whole thing is just a massive nightmare. And then, as we started coming out of the COVID, dip, so to speak, we were rebuilding the business. We decided to rebuild it in a healthier position than it had begun. And so, it took us a little longer to get back to where we had been in terms of revenue, but all of a sudden over that time, we were able to kind of reevaluate what we were doing and doing all of those things in a better way to set us up for long-term success. So now, literally, thank God, we are at a point where we're cash flow positive again and paying off the debt and moving in the right direction. But that was something that we didn't know. Like, there was no guarantee. We could have just turned around and lost everything a second time. And I had seen in the first kind of growth phase God's hand in it. There was a moment where we had just absolute panic. Like, we launched in October. 2 months in, we had 4 or 5 members. We're like, all right, well, we're growing. And then we were like, but it's okay because January is going to turn everything around. January is when everybody signs up for gyms, right?
Right.
So we're like, we got this. We hit January and we had 0 signups in the month of January.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, what did we do wrong? Like, we have ruined ourselves. We have ruined this business. And, I prayed a lot at the end of January, early February, just like, God, what is going on? Like, did you let me step into this to fail? Is this what's happening? Like, are you humbling me? Like, I thought this was going to be something that we could use as a blessing, and instead it's a moment of failure. Like, is that what's happening? And in February, we ended up with 14 signups and for our gym, that was just absurd to have that many people in 1 month. And it was just it exploded. And I was like, okay, God's got this covered. Right. But then it was still up and down. And we had an individual who was antagonizing a little bit, I shall say, and was really kind of a thorn in our side. And I was like, man, this guy could bring down our business if his threats turn out to be credible at all, you know? And I was freaking out about that. And I was like
Uh-huh.
praying about that, like, God, what do I do? Like, what do I do? And, you know, I remember like worshiping and just being like, that's it. I'm going to let it go. I'm going to let you handle it. You know, this really is in your hands, not mine. And it was literally 5 minutes later after I prayed that I get a call from my partner and he's like, dude, you're not going to believe what just happened. What? He's like, this guy just walked into our gym and signed up. I said, what? He's like, yeah, he signed up. Like, he's paying us money. I was like, what do you mean he's paying us money? He's like, not just that, but he signed up for the most expensive package we have. And he's now our top client. And I'm just like, what? Like,
Yeah,
this
yeah,
guy
yeah,
went
yeah.
from like literally being able to close down the gym to being, you know, instead of blessing to our gym, it's like only God can do that.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
from that extreme to the other, like, dude, we had nothing to do with that. You know what I mean? It was wild.
It it is interesting that it came in that time of deep worship, right? Like
Yeah.
I always come back to like I've said this multiple times. Like I feel like I understand God, not that I can, but so much more that I'm a father because my kids can't give me anything, but
Yeah.
when they're hurt or they need something, I want them to just go like daddy, daddy, like just come to daddy, and
Yeah.
in that place of worship where you're just like open, like hey, daddy, I don't know, I need your help, and it's just like watch me, all right, like daddy's I got this, watch me, I'm gonna do what you
Yeah.
you can, you won't even believe this, so you'll know that it was me, because nobody could do it like I do it. And so yeah, the guy that could potentially, you know has your you know has you in his hands in your throat, is now your top paying customer. It's like, yeah, you can't question who that is, because
Yeah.
that's a God thing. You can't
Yeah.
question
100% true.
it. What was the role of like tithing? Because I always think of like, if you tithe, you get your spiritual, but people don't realize, like, if like when I tithe, I expect things to come back because that's what the
Yeah.
Bible tells me. But
Yeah.
like business people won't, you know pay for their marketing. It's like the same thing, right? It's like you pay for this thing, and you expect it to come back out. And I feel like that reinforces your faith muscles. Like, I tithe, and you know what? I haven't been the best at managing my finances, but I've always had a roof over my head. I always have food on the table. Like, the doors are always open. Does that translate for you in business in any way?
Yeah. So one of my partners um, and I really, from the beginning, said that we want to leverage the business for more than just business purposes. And it's always been something we've talked about, trying to, you know, put it out there as, you know, this is something more than just that. And the name of the business is Vital Fitness. And we talk about living a life of vitality, you know, physically, mentally, spiritually, right? And that last aspect, you know, for a long time we kind of struggled. Like, how are we doing that? Like, is there a way that we're actually doing that? Um, and then we've been able to partner with charities and give them, you know, the space to do events, and we've
Yeah.
been able to, you know, to do different things like that, that has allowed us to support and partner with people doing ministry. And then recently we've actually hired another coach who is going to be running a ministry out of the gym.
Nice.
um, you know, and that's kind of, in terms of space, something that we've talked about. Like, that's, we want the space to be more than just a gym, right?
Right.
And so that's been something that's always been kind of at the forefront. But even before the gym started, you know, God worked on my heart to say, if you're willing to give to me, I'm willing to open my hand to you. And and it was a hard lesson for me to learn, but I did it, and it was painful,
Uh-huh.
and it was giving, you know, beyond the what I thought was possible, that really helped allow those breakthroughs to happen, and the financial breakthroughs that were necessary to create the investment in the gym to begin with,
Uh-huh.
I felt like we're directly tied to that. And yeah, now on the backside, it's like, okay, I need to make sure that I'm not just limiting myself to a number by saying, all right, God, well, you got your 10% and now it's mine.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
But
yeah,
it's like, show me what you want me to do and show me where you want me to give this. And, you know, if it's a request from you, I'm going to give it.
yeah.
And that's been a shift in my perspective and attitude. And as my ability to give has increased, my desire to do so has increased. And I noticed that, you know, you can always make an excuse to not give. You can always say, well, it's not time yet because XYZ,
Uh-huh.
or, I could give, but they're not going to use the money right. I think it's better
Yeah,
for me just to hold on to the money
yeah,
and create more money. And then maybe I'll just give a larger sum later. There's always something that you could say that, holds you back. But the reality is it's not up to you. You know what I mean? And that's the thing that really kind of resonates in my mind when I, do, acts of giving is it doesn't matter how they use the money. That's not
uh,
up to me. It's not up to me.
right, right,
What's up to me is to obey, and
right.
then it's up to them to obey, right? They need to do what they're supposed to be doing with that. And that's not up to me. So, from that perspective, like, it's not my money I'm giving. Ultimately, it's God's money that he's shared with me, and now I'm sharing with them, or whatever. And that's been a perspective that's um, allowed me to continue that. And there's a story that I heard many, many years ago that has helped me kind of keep that perspective throughout. And it's the guy that founded, I think, Caterpillar, the construction equipment
Company.
company,
Yeah.
told God that he would live on essentially what he needed, and he would give God the rest. And he said, I don't want to limit you. You bless me as much as possible, and you will ultimately be blessing everyone around me through me. And he went from tithing 10% to tithing 90%,
Uh-huh.
because obviously, as his business grew and exploded and his income exploded, he was still a wealthy man living on
Uh-huh.
10% of his income and giving away 90%. And that opened my eyes to, that concept of blessing that God has for us, which is, the tighter you hold it, the less comes your way. The more you
Uh-huh.
open your hand, the more easily the finances flow to you and through you, and God's able to bless others through you. He wants to do that. And as we started the show a little bit talking about, you know, the role of a business person within the church, there's a gift of giving. There's a blessing of giving that should be taking place, particularly when you are somebody that has that opportunity. And it's not for other people to tell you you have to, but it's the opportunity to give and to worship through giving, um,
Uh-huh.
that can be exercised. And I think that that's a responsibility of business people within the church who have become successful, is to, like I said, give with an open hand to the things that God prompts them to give to.
And it's wonderful because I think what you're talking about is you have your tithe, which is the 10%, but then the above it, the above that is the offering, and that's
Yeah,
that's a whole nother realm because I think
yeah,
I think there's a number where like there's might be like 20% of most churches, the membership, the congregation tithes.
right,
So of those who tithe, now there's even smaller subset that gives offerings. So that's over and above what your
yeah,
10% is, and that's where you give God the opportunity for the supernatural because you're saying, "Hey, I'm trusting in you." And I know as a man, provider, business person, like in your head, it's like, I could really use this couple of grand here. Like, are you
yeah,
really telling me to give this? And I'm not sure, but hey, I'm trusting you. And that's what I think God wants. He wants us to trust and to walk in faith. Um,
yeah,
I wanted to ask, just talking about the Corona stuff and the shutdown.
yeah.
Have you played that mental game in your head as like if this comes around again, are we going to plan on do we have a plan of what we want to do? Because I mean that was something that's one of the saddest things. Like you see people like losing their businesses, and to some people it's like, oh, insurance pays for it, or whatever. It's like, no, like people put their life savings into this thing. Like it's not, like yes, they make money out of it, but this is like I've said it before. It's not cliche to say this is people's hopes and dreams. It's more to them than just some people are just in it for the money. Fine, whatever. But there's also people who is like, man, this was a thing that I tried and I pushed out in faith like no other, and now it's shut down. It's not because of any of my doing.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, my heart broke for small business owners, particularly new small business owners
Yeah.
at the start of Corona, because I knew intimately, what they were experiencing. And man, that's terrible. And yeah, I mean, there are ways to adapt, right? To figure it out, quote unquote. But even still, your best adaptation isn't always going to be enough, right?
Uh-huh.
And especially when things are outside of your control. And that's there are a lot of lives that have been upended as a result. But for our own business, there are ways for us to adapt and to figure things out. And we started to sort those things out through the first shutdown.
Uh-huh.
And fortunately, like I said, it wasn't a long shutdown in this state, but we still
Uh-huh.
didn't have the membership. It's not like everybody just showed up, right? It
Yeah,
was
yeah.
like all of a sudden your membership was cut in half, and people were like, "Yeah, well, I'll come back maybe." And it was a situation where we had to try to figure out, like, all right, well, what's the way to survive moving forward? And we have kind of put in place a plan if something were to happen again, right? Like, all right, how do we communicate with our members? Um, how do we continue to grow through that process of shutdown so that we don't, we will lose members, but how do we offset that, right?
Uh-huh.
Um, and there's no guarantees. If it were to shut down again tomorrow, it would be devastating, and it would take time to rebuild. So, we do have a plan in place, but it doesn't mean that it wouldn't be a really difficult time. And um, you know, who knows what would happen through that,
Yeah.
for sure.
One of the things that I think kind of came to light in my mind, like I'm a W-2 guy, so this is coming from a W-2 guy, was that like I don't control anything at my job. Like I have no authority over anything.
Yeah,
I think as and the people who are frustrated, it's like part of the frustration is that you have no control over anything. So I think for me, it's like, hey, this should be a call to if you have an idea to start your own business that you own, that you are in control of. Because I mean, because you still work your W-2 gig as well as the gym, right? So you kind of
yeah,
you have something that is yours while you have this, and that's great. But I think that small business is a way for men to be like, hey, this is a place where I have authority and dominion. Like this
yeah,
is mine. I think we've lost a lot of that, right? Because in the last, like, I don't know, 15 years, I think they say like the small business ownership creation. It's like, I don't know what the rate is, but it's way less than it's ever been. And it's like, I don't know if I don't know if that's healthy for us as as men, as a country, because you know more and more people are putting their financial futures in the hands of somebody else, and you're not in control of it
right.
at all.
Yeah. I think it's been building for a long time, since the Industrial Revolution has focused business in business centers, so to speak, business, towns and cities. Uh, it's become more and more efficient. Um, that's a benefit, right? But a huge
Uh-huh.
downside has been a loss of autonomy, right?
Uh-huh.
And I mean, there are many downsides, trust me, but um, you know, it's interesting to see a lot of the cultural shift to believe that men shouldn't be autonomous. Men shouldn't be wild and dangerous and free. They shouldn't be, their own man.
Uh-huh.
And, you know, certainly within a large corporate setting, it's difficult to be autonomous. It's difficult
Uh-huh.
to, have a say, and that's what matters. And the freedom to run a business the way you see fit and to make those decisions is huge. We had to make decisions as a business at the gym. How are we paying the people that work for us through this process, right? Like, we're losing a massive amount of money. Are we going to continue paying them the same way? Is this going to
Uh-huh.
shift it? Like, we had to make those decisions and then live with them, but we got to make those decisions, right?
Right.
At the 9 to 5, I was told everything, right? I had no opinion. I wasn't allowed to
Uh-huh.
have an opinion, right? Like, I was told, you're going to do this and then you're going to do that. And I don't care if you like it, but this is what you're doing next, right?
Right.
And that's something, it really did open my eyes through that process, how much I really felt blessed to have the opportunity to have a business and to step out on my own in those ways. And it's really encouraged me to continue down that path because, you know, there are a lot of things that culturally are being shoved down our throats.
Uh-huh.
And corporate America is accepting all of those things with open arms
Uh-huh.
and practicing shoving down your throat, their ideals. And as a Christian, as a man, I don't subscribe to all the things they say I should subscribe to, so to speak.
Right.
And to have the autonomy to say, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to agree with you. I'm not going
Uh-huh.
to whatever. Um, is priceless. That's something I feel like more and more is valuable to me, and is the value of having a business. It's not just the financial upside, which obviously is there. It's a big deal, but also the truth of freedom. You know,
Uh-huh.
how are you expressing your freedom? How are you, experiencing freedom? Right? If somebody else still controls everything that you do, down to when you go to the bathroom, you're not
Uh-huh.
free, right?
No.
Ultimately, you're just tied down by something else. So, that's definitely something I've thought about, and I 100% agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's why, part of the reason why I wanted to have you on, because you do sales coaching. Me and you have had some conversations, and I know you've helped some other people. But if you're thinking about starting a business or you need some consults, you'd be somebody that people can reach out to, correct?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Because you do offer coaching. You have your sales masters. Is it a course or training? That was, I don't know what you call it.
Yeah. So Sales Masters is basically an 8-week program to help people go from being unsure in sales situations to being able to close deals with consistency. And the value in that is a lot of people can drum up leads here and there. They can get on phone calls, but they don't know how to get those people to agree to hire them or to pay for their service or product. And I really help people get from, not sure to certainty, getting that yes, and creating revenue. So, yeah, I mean, I love to help people through that process. And it's the big reason why I've decided to go through the coaching and teaching route as opposed to just doing high ticket sales myself.
Uh-huh.
I really am passionate about just that, which is helping people get those breakthroughs, starting their own businesses, reaching new levels in their business, and finding that freedom themselves.
Yeah, 'cause, I'm probably pretty romantic and idealistic. I accept that about myself. But I think, like, like if you have a man who's able to start his electric business and get sales, and somebody who's able to start their coaching business and it get sales, you they say you give a man a fish, he eats for a day. You teach him how to fish. It's like, I think we have a lack of men who know how to fish. If I look at myself honestly, it's like, I've worked at a job that kind of like provided everything for me. Like, I haven't really learned much. It was, being on Twitter, it's like you get exposed to people like yourself, and all these ideas. It's just like, oh, like, you run a gym. It's like, oh, that's really cool. Like, all the fitness guys they're great to be around because they're in motion and they're providing value and helping people get so all these things is just retraining of your mind and exposed to new ideas. But I think ultimately, you know, if you more and more men are working in these big corporations and they're not saying what's really on their mind because they're threatened. Their livelihoods are threatened. Whereas I think if you have a small business, you're able to just speak freely, but you're also have that confidence of like, no, you're not gonna tell me, man. Like this is my place. You can come and you can be a paying customer and you'll be treated with respect. But if not, like, there's the door, man. You could go somewhere else. And I think there's a lot of
Yeah.
a lot of a lot of power in that. And I think
You
that
know, yeah, sorry, I didn't mean
no,
to
go ahead, go ahead,
butt
no, go
in,
ahead.
but one of the things that I noticed that was most surprising actually was my shift at my 9 to 5. So I went from just kind of listening and accepting everything that was said to being more comfortable in my own skin, in my own opinion, right? And I was able to communicate with people at much higher levels than I had started out, being comfortable communicating. And not only was I communicating with them, but I was able to express differing opinions and
Uh-huh.
express, different options for doing things. And I had a different perspective than everybody else in my business because
Mhm.
I have outside experience,
Right.
right? I've created value for myself by stepping out of the company. And now they're turning around saying, "Oh wow, who is this guy? Like he
Uh-huh.
understands things. He's willing to speak his mind." And there was almost an increase of respect within the business for myself when I had autonomy. It was like, "Oh, you don't need us anymore? Ugh. We actually respect you a lot more."
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was very interesting. And it didn't shift my ultimate trajectory or goals, but it certainly opened my eyes to how people respond to what I mean, I couldn't describe as anything else but a personal, authority and power that had
Yeah.
grown, that didn't exist before.
Well, I mean, there's something to it. It's like, right, like, hey, we're talking about these ideas here. I've lived it, proved it, went through it, but like it's another thing just to express a contrary opinion when it's like, well, you know what? I'm making money over here too. So, like they're not gonna threaten me anymore. Like,
Right.
like whereas a lot of
Yeah.
people will just, hey, I'm not gonna rock the boat because if I say something, then I could get fired, and then I'm gonna be looking for a job now, and I don't know. Where it's like, well, I don't
Yeah.
know how much money you make at the gym. That's here or there, but there's something about like, hey, I know I can make money. I know I can create it. I know I'm providing value, and that's a really
Yeah.
powerful thing.
Yeah. For sure.
I think we're coming up here on our time here, Andrew. Before we wrap up, did you have any last things that you wanted to go ahead and let the audience know? All my thousands
Yeah.
and thousands and thousands of listeners.
Yeah. Honestly, the thing that I want to encourage people on, truthfully, is, take action, right? It doesn't matter how much you think you know or how ready you think you are. None of that matters. Honestly, it really doesn't. What matters is that you set a target, you understand with clarity where you want to go, and then you just start taking steps in that direction. And the first steps are education, right? Like learning what are the next steps, and start doing the things that are necessary to start just moving in the direction of your goals. And a lot of people talk about, like, and I found this out when I started businesses. A lot of people really truly desire to start businesses and do things and be something other than what they are currently. And they're able to, right? What holds them back is a fear of stepping through the curtain, right? A fear of finding out what's in the darkness, a fear of like stepping out into the deep. And, yeah, it's scary and there are consequences to it. But the reality is you're going to be a different person, right? And the person you desire to be is the person that's on the other side of that step. And once you start making, some type of effort to get there, to be that person, the next steps, they open themselves up to you. So it's not like you're always just absolutely in blindness, always in fear. But the reality is those first few steps are scary, and you've got to commit to taking the step. And then the rest starts to open up, and you've really developed a process for yourself of understanding, like, all right, target, step, and then just keep moving. You do that. You turn around 6 months from now, and you're a totally different person.
Mhm.
You turn around a year from now, and you've started a business, or you've gotten the promotion that you had been afraid to work towards, or whatever it is. Taking action trumps thinking about it, talking about it, and wishing for it.
Yeah.
And that action is the difference maker between somebody that ultimately stands as peers versus somebody that looks up and wishes that they had taken action sometime in the past.
Bro, that's a killer closing statement, man. That's awesome, man. I think this is exactly why I had you on for that right there, man. If anybody doesn't get anything from it, I mean that was outstanding, Andrew. So thank you so much for coming on. His name is Andrew Strohm, everybody. He's the sales king. King. Oh, one thing I wanted to ask you: why are salespeople always killing it and crushing it? Are you a killer or a crusher?
Listen, man, it's all the things I could talk about with that. It's funny because salespeople have this like aggressive like persona. Some of my best salespeople ever have been the exact opposite. Like quiet, intuitive, like they just ask the right question at the right time and boom, right? The world opens up to them. So you don't have to be a killer, a crusher, a slayer, or anything else to be a salesperson. You can be a salesperson. Just ask the right questions and present the solution.
For sure, man. I forgot I wanted to ask that. That was funny.
That is
He's
funny. I
Andrew
like
Strohm,
that.
everybody. He's outstanding. He's a sales king. Andrew Strohm is on Twitter at Andrew Strohm. That's ANDREW Strohm STROHM. The same thing on IG. Responsible for over 70 million plus in sales. He's a gym owner. He teaches sales and success. Andrew, thanks so much for coming on today, man. It's been a lot of fun.
Appreciate you having me, Joel. Thanks.